If you ask my mother, she'll tell you she has two sons. But if you listen closely, you'll realize only one ever mattered to her. My younger brother, Liam, the golden child, the pride of the family, the one who could do no wrong. And then there was me, Ethan, the shadowed son, the one who was always an afterthought. From the moment we were kids, it was clear where my mother's loyalties lay. When Liam scraped his knee, the world had to stop until he was comforted. When I got hurt, "You'll be fine, Ethan. Toughen up." When Liam failed a test, the teacher was unfair. When I excelled, "Try harder next time." The favoritism wasn't just a feeling, it was a fact. But I learned young that I couldn't rely on my family for anything. While Liam was handed every opportunity, a prestigious college, a hefty trust fund, a job in my father's company, I was left to carve out my own path. And I did. I built my business from the ground up, brick by brick, late nights and early mornings, sacrificing sleep and social life just to make it work. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to prove that I could succeed without them. At first, I thought they simply didn't care about my progress. I was wrong. They cared, just not in the way a family should. My mother, Victoria, wasn't just indifferent to my success. She saw it as a threat. She had spent her entire life grooming Liam to be the family's legacy, the son who would carry the Montgomery name to greatness. But suddenly, here I was, rising, succeeding, proving that I was the one with real potential. And that was unacceptable to her. That's when the whispers started. Investors pulling out without explanation. Business deals mysteriously falling apart. Competitors gaining access to confidential plans. At first, I chalked it up to bad luck. But luck had nothing to do with it. Behind the scenes, Victoria and my father were orchestrating my downfall, quietly tightening the noose around my neck. I should have seen it coming. But I was still naive enough to believe that, deep down, they were still my family. That mistake cost me dearly. It started with an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. A partnership with a well-known investor, promising to take my business to the next level. Everything looked perfect, on paper, at least. My mother, surprisingly, encouraged me to go for it. That should have been my first red flag. I signed the deal, believing I had finally earned her respect. I had no idea I had just walked into her trap. I should have known better than to trust my mother. The deal I signed, the one she encouraged, turned out to be nothing more than a slow-acting poison. At first, everything seemed fine. The investment money flowed in, my company expanded, and for the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, my mother had finally decided to support me. But then, the cracks began to show. Contracts were vague, riddled with loopholes that benefited the investors more than me. Payments started stalling, suppliers pulled out, and soon, I found myself drowning in debts I never agreed to. I wasn't running my company anymore. I was just trying to keep it from collapsing. Through it all, Victoria remained by my side. "These things happen in business, Ethan," she would say, voice dripping with false sympathy. "You just need to push through." Push through. As if she wasn't the one tightening the noose around my neck. It wasn't until my grandmother, Margaret, intervened that I finally saw the truth. One evening, she invited me to her estate under the pretense of a casual dinner. But the moment I walked in, I knew this wasn't a social call. She sat at the grand mahogany dining table, hands folded, eyes sharp with unspoken knowledge. "Sit," she said, and when Margaret Montgomery commanded, you obeyed. She studied me for a long moment before speaking. "Do you think your mother has changed, Ethan?" I hesitated. I thought, no, she interrupted. "She hasn't, and she never will." Then she told me everything. She had seen the documents, the quiet manipulations, the way Victoria funneled money out of my accounts and redirected it to Liam, the way my father used his business connections to block my access to better investors. They had been setting me up for failure from the beginning, waiting for the perfect moment to pull the rug out from under me. I felt sick. All this time, I had been fighting battles I never even knew existed. Margaret reached for a folder beside her and slid it across the table. "This is how you survive," she said. Inside were bank statements, legal documents, and property deeds, all in my name. "I knew your mother would try this someday," she continued. "So I made sure she wouldn't succeed. She had transferred a hidden portion of her fortune to me," shielding it where Victoria couldn't reach. It was my lifeline. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But the relief didn't last long. As I walked back into my family's estate later that night, I overheard Liam laughing in the study. "You should have seen the idiot," he sneered. "He still thinks he's going to be something." Victoria chuckled. "Not for long. Just wait until the final phase kicks in." My blood ran cold. They weren't finished with me yet. But now, neither was I. Hook. I stepped away from the study, gripping Margaret's documents. This time, I wouldn't just defend myself, I'd strike back. I had spent years believing that if I worked hard enough, if I built something worth being proud of, my family would finally see me, finally respect me. But after everything Margaret had revealed, I realized the truth. They never wanted me to succeed. They had spent my entire life ensuring I remained in the shadows while Liam basked in the light. But now, the tides were shifting. Armed with my grandmother's warning and the security she had provided me, I no longer felt like a pawn in their game. I was done playing defense. Now, it was my turn to move. Liam, oblivious as ever, continued his lavish, empty life. Expensive cars, high-end parties, meaningless investments. He had never worked a real day in his life, never had to build anything from the ground up. He didn't understand the value of money, only the power it gave him. And with our parents funding his every whim, he had no reason to stop. I watched him from a distance, unseen yet always aware. It was almost laughable. He strutted around like he was untouchable, the true heir to the Montgomery legacy, while blindly marching toward his own downfall. And I was more than happy to let him fall. Victoria, on the other hand, was growing bolder. She had played the long game, orchestrating my downfall piece by piece, and now she was ready for the grand finale. The financial trap she had laid out for me had slowly been tightening. Investors withdrawing, banks questioning my credibility, business partners suddenly hesitant. Everything was set for me to crumble. I could almost hear the satisfaction in her voice as she called me to the estate. "Ethan," she said smoothly, "we need to talk about your financial situation." I knew exactly what this was. The moment I stepped into that room, she would present me with my so-called only option. A bailout from my father's company, on their terms. Terms that would strip me of control, bury me under them. I played my part well, feigning concern, frustration. Let her believe she had one. Then, when she leaned forward, ready to deliver the final blow, I pulled out my own trump card. "Actually, Mother, I think we need to talk about Liam's financial situation." The smirk on her face faltered. "I mean, I'm sure you've noticed," I continued, watching the confusion settle in, "how much he's been spending. The luxury vacations, the gambling, the failed business ventures. You do still have control over his trust, right?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't. Liam, in his arrogance, had burned through everything they had given him. Everything. He had assumed that no matter how recklessly he spent, no matter how many bad investments he made, the money would always be there. Except it wasn't. I saw the exact moment Victoria realized it, the way her fingers tightened against the armrest of her chair. She had been so focused on ruining me, she had ignored the real problem. "You're lying," she said, but there was no confidence in her voice now. I leaned back, watching her squirm. "Check the accounts." She did. Right there, in front of me, she pulled out her phone and checked. And I saw the moment reality crashed down on her. Liam wasn't just overspending. He was drowning. Loans, debts, unpaid balances, failed ventures. And none of it was coming from my accounts, because thanks to Margaret, mine were untouchable. Victoria's carefully constructed empire, the golden future she had built around Liam, was collapsing right before her eyes. And I was still standing. The next few weeks were pure chaos. Liam, for the first time in his life, faced consequences. Creditors knocking at his door. Businesses cutting ties. His name, once associated with prestige, now whispered in circles as a warning of reckless failure. And Victoria? She tried to fix it. She fought like hell to save him, to pull him out of the mess he had created. But the more she fought, the worse it got. Because no matter what she did, she couldn't touch me. Margaret had ensured that my assets, my investments, and everything I had worked for were legally protected. Untouchable. I was free. For the first time in my life, I had won. I watched as Liam finally realized what it meant to struggle, to fall, to lose everything. And as I stood there, watching my family's golden sun crumble, I made a decision. This wasn't enough. Not yet. I wanted revenge. Liam had always carried himself like a king, the favored son, the golden heir, untouchable. But now, standing before me, he looked nothing like royalty. His arrogance had been stripped away, replaced by desperation. His clothes were still designer, but they hung loosely on him, as though they no longer fit the man he had become. The shadows under his eyes betrayed sleepless nights filled with worry. He was drowning, and he had finally realized that no one was coming to save him. "Ethan," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "We do." He exhaled sharply, frustration flickering across his face, but he swallowed it down. He was here to beg, after all. "I know things have been difficult between us," he started carefully, choosing his words like he actually cared about them for once. "But we're brothers. We should have each other's backs, right?" I arched a brow. "You mean like the way you had mine?" His smile faltered. "I didn't know. You didn't want to know," I cut in, voice even. "Big difference." Liam pressed his lips together, hands balling into fists. He had always been good at pretending charming, effortless, and quick-witted. But now, with everything crumbling around him, he had nothing left but the truth. And the truth was simple. He wanted my help, my money, my mercy, but I had none to give. "You think I don't know why you're here?" I asked, standing. "You think I don't know Victoria sent you?" He flinched at our mother's name, and I smirked. "Go home, Liam," I said, walking past him. "And tell her I said no." Victoria did not handle rejection well. Within 24 hours, the war began. Lawsuits, media slander, corporate sabotage. It was an all-out attack, a desperate attempt to break me, to destroy everything I had built before I could do the same to her. She wanted me crushed, humiliated, erased. She should have known better. The Ethan she had controlled for years, the one who wanted her approval, who sought his family's love, that Ethan was gone. The man she was facing now? I was a product of her cruelty, and I was more than ready to return the favor. The counterattack, I didn't fight her battle. I ended it. Every lawsuit she threw at me, I crushed it with facts and counterclaims. Every slanderous article she planted, I exposed the lies, dragging her credibility through the mud. Every attempt to sabotage my business, I struck back harder, dismantling her network piece by piece. And then, when she was already bleeding, I delivered the final blow. I exposed her. Victoria Montgomery had spent decades climbing to the top, crafting an image of wealth, power, and respectability. But behind the curtain, she was nothing more than a fraud. With the help of my contacts, I uncovered her darkest secrets: tax fraud, illegal dealings, backdoor bribes. I made sure every journalist, every investor, and every powerful figure she had ever manipulated saw her for what she truly was. By the time I was done, her name was no longer a symbol of status. It was a stain. She was ruined. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. Victoria may have fallen, but Liam was still standing, barely. And I intended to knock him down for good. I had been planning this moment for a long time. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about ensuring that neither of them could ever rise again. I smiled to myself, watching the pieces of my final move fall into place. Liam and Victoria had spent their lives trying to destroy me. Now, I was going to erase them. Hook. Tomorrow, the world would watch as the last remnants of their empire crumbled into dust. And I would be the one standing at the top. They stood before me, shadows of the people they once were. Victoria Montgomery, once a woman of power and control, looked small. The sharpness in her eyes had dulled. Her once pristine posture slumped under the weight of irreversible failure. Liam, my younger brother, the golden son, the chosen one, was in ruins. The expensive suits, the cocky smirk, the air of effortless superiority, all gone. His hands trembled as he reached for me, his voice hoarse, desperate. "Ethan, please." I didn't move. "Please," I echoed, my voice devoid of emotion. He swallowed hard, his gaze darting to our mother, who stood frozen beside him. "This wasn't my fault," Liam muttered, his voice cracking. "I didn't know how bad things were. I trusted her." He turned on Victoria then, anger flaring in his hollowed eyes. "This is all because of you. You used me. You—" slap. Victoria's palm struck Liam's face so hard the sound echoed. "Shut up," she hissed. Even now, at her lowest, she still refused to break. "You ungrateful boy," she spat. "I did everything for you. And you? You're weak. Pathetic. I should have known you'd fold the moment things got hard." Liam's face twisted with rage. "You ruined us." Victoria lifted her chin, turning to me with that same arrogance she had worn my entire life. "But it didn't work anymore. Not on me. You think you've won?" she sneered. "You think you're better than us because you played your little games and took everything away?" I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. She wanted me to argue. She wanted me to lash out. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I leaned in, lowering my voice so that only she could hear. "You taught me everything I know about betrayal," I murmured. "Now, live with the consequences." Then I turned away and walked out. Freedom, I stepped outside into the cool evening air, exhaling for the first time in years. For so long, I had been trapped, a pawn in their twisted game. But now I was free. My business was thriving. My reputation was intact. And, most importantly, I had survived them. Resilience had been my greatest weapon. Patience had been my sharpest blade. And I had won. I took one last glance at the house behind me, where two people who had once controlled my fate now stood in the wreckage of their own making. Then, without another word, I walked forward. Without them. For good. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another thrilling tale. Until next time, stay sharp and stay wise. See you soon.